"You're very hungry, aren't you?" Maya asked softly, her voice carried on the evening breeze. The old man flinched slightly and turned his head. His white hair hung down the back of his neck, his face gaunt, cheeks hollow. His cloudy eyes stared at her for a moment, saying nothing. Maya didn't need a reply. She gently placed the brown paper bag on the bench, gave a small nod, and walked away. That was the first time she had spoken to him. Maya worked as a server at an upscale restaurant in downtown Houston. The place catered to business executives, politicians, and the occasional celebrity. The job was high pressure, demanding, but it paid well enough for Maya to cover rent on a modest 2-bedroom apartment where she lived with her younger brother, Jordan, a senior in college studying architecture. Their parents had died in a car crash when Maya was just 19, and she had stepped into their shoes, carrying the family's weight ever since. The restaurant had a strict no leftovers policy. Any untouched dish, no matter how pristine, had to be discarded. Maya couldn't stand it. On multiple occasions, she had quietly packed up full plates and, after her late shift, brought them to the small park behind the neighborhood church. That's where the old man always sat alone, motionless. He never asked for help, never begged, never spoke. Only his hollow eyes and his stillness spoke of hunger and fatigue. Maya didn't know his name, but she knew need when she saw it. To her, each meal she gave was a small act of rebellion against indifference, against a city growing colder with apathy. One night, as Maya placed the paper bag on the bench like always, the sharp slam of a car door echoed behind her. Bryce Stanton, the restaurant manager, stood a few feet away, his arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "You again?" he said, his voice cold as steel. "This makes 3 times, doesn't it?" Maya lowered her head. She didn't argue. "You know the rules. You know the consequences." His voice tightened. "You're fired, effective immediately." No one defended Maya. Her coworkers looked at her with a mixture of pity and distance. They couldn't understand why someone with a steady job would risk it all for a nameless homeless man. "And what about you? What would you have done in Maya's place?" In a city growing colder with indifference, sometimes one small act of kindness is enough to change a life. Would you risk your job to help a stranger? Tell us in the comments below where you are watching from and what part of this story touched you the most. If this story moved you, give it a like. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another powerful moment like this one. But before Maya's dismissal could even become gossip, a photo of her kneeling beside the old man with the paper bag quietly went viral. It didn't show her face, only her silhouette and a gentle gesture. The caption read simply, "In a cold city, someone is still warm." What no one expected was that just hours after the photo spread, a sleek black limousine rolled up to the park. 2 men in suits approached the old man, calling him by a name Maya had never known. "Mr. Harlan, sir, we've been looking for you." The homeless man, the silent figure so many had ignored, was actually Richard Harlan, tech billionaire and founder of Harlan Systems. He had gone missing from a private care facility weeks ago due to a memory lapse after a fall. No one knew how he'd survived the streets, where he'd eaten, where he'd sheltered until he softly told his bodyguard, "That girl, she fed me every day. She had such a sad smile." The next day, Harlan Systems issued a public call to find the girl with the brown paper bag. Though the viral photo didn't show her face clearly, her uniform from the upscale restaurant made her easy to trace. The company's media team and HR staff quickly reached out to the restaurant to identify her. Meanwhile, Maya had no idea. She was at home, juggling overdue bills, searching for a new job, and consoling her brother over the loss of his scholarship. She didn't know yet that a simple leftover sandwich hadn't just saved a man's life, it was about to change hers forever. It started with a knock, 3 measured taps on the wooden door of her apartment. Maya had just returned from the employment office, another rejection letter in hand, the weight of disappointment pressing deeper into her shoulders. Jordan was still at the library, unaware his sister had lost the only job supporting their home. She moved slowly, expecting a neighbor, or maybe the building manager with more bad news. But when she opened the door, her breath caught. A man in a tailored navy suit stood tall and composed. His demeanor was courteous, but the black SUV idling at the curb behind him said this was no ordinary visit. "Miss Maya Thomas?" he asked, voice crisp but warm. "Yes," she answered cautiously. "I represent Mr. Richard Harlan," he said, handing her a business card embossed with the Harlan Systems logo. "He would like to meet with you, personally." Maya blinked, stunned. The name echoed in her memory, the old man in the park. The viral photo, the sudden media flurry. She barely managed to reply. Can I ask why?" The man gave a slight smile. "He remembers you, and he insists." The drive to the Harlan estate was surreal. The SUV was silent, except for the soft hum of the engine. Maya clutched her handbag like a shield, her mind racing. Why her? What did he want? Could this be some elaborate mistake? When they arrived, the gates opened silently, revealing a sprawling property with manicured gardens and a mansion that seemed pulled from another world. A uniformed butler greeted her and led her through high-ceilinged corridors lined with family portraits and contemporary art. Finally, they stopped in a sunlit room where a fireplace crackled gently, and there, sitting in a worn armchair by the window, was the old man. But he looked different, clean-shaven, dressed in a wool cardigan and slacks. His eyes, still soft with age, lit up when he saw her. "Maya," he said, his voice fragile but certain. "You found me." Ugh. She stood frozen, unsure if he was confused or truly remembered. But then he continued, slowly, each word deliberate. "I was lost. Not just my way. My mind, too. People forgot I existed. But you didn't. You fed me. You saw me." She moved closer, hesitating, then sat down across from him. "I didn't know who you were," she said gently. "I just knew you were hungry." Richard nodded, eyes glassy. That's why it mattered. A woman entered the room, middle-aged and sharply dressed. "I'm Helen, Mr. Harlan's legal advisor. I'd like to thank you, Miss Thomas. You may not realize it, but your care quite literally saved his life." Maya felt overwhelmed. She looked from Helen to Richard, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. "I didn't expect anything. I just did what I thought was right." Helen nodded. "And that's exactly why he wants to help you." Richard reached over to a small table beside him, picking up a sealed envelope. He handed it to Maya. Inside was a letter handwritten by Richard himself, and a check. Maya's eyes widened as she read the amount. "It's too much," she whispered. "It's not enough," Richard replied, smiling faintly. "It's just the beginning." The letter detailed his appreciation, his gratitude, and his desire to support her however he could. He had instructed his team to settle her family's medical debts, cover Jordan's tuition, and offer Maya an opportunity to manage a new charitable project. He was launching an initiative to serve the homeless and mentally ill, with Maya as the director of community outreach. She stared at the offer, her chest tightening. "I don't know if I'm qualified." "You're qualified," Helen said firmly. "Your heart is, and we'll help with the rest." For a long moment, Maya sat in silence. The room smelled faintly of lavender and firewood. Outside the window, robins hopped between hedges, unaware that the woman inside was at a crossroads that could change her entire life. She thought of her mother, who had once told her, "Sometimes, child, the world will punish you for being kind, but kindness, true kindness, never goes unseen." Now, it had not only been seen, it had been remembered. "Okay," she finally said, her voice quiet but steady. "I'll do it." "Huh." Richard's eyes closed briefly in what seemed like relief. Helen smiled, and somewhere deep in Maya's heart, a small, long-forgotten flame flickered back to life. That night, back in her modest apartment, Maya sat with Jordan and told him everything. He didn't speak for a while, then simply hugged her. "I always knew you were the strongest person I know," he whispered. She smiled, brushing away a tear. For the first time in a long time, the weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. And in another part of the city, a team of architects and planners began drafting the blueprint for what would become the Havanan urban sanctuary inspired by a woman with nothing to give but a meal and a moment of compassion. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Maya stood at the center of the unfinished building site, wind tugging at her coat as construction crews moved around her. The skeletal frame of what would soon be the Haven rose slowly into the pale Texas sky. Steel beams, concrete foundations, and blueprints full of intention and hope this place was becoming real. But as real as it felt under her boots, the weight of the role she had stepped into pressed harder with each passing day. 2 weeks had passed since her first meeting with Richard Harlan. In that time, her world had turned upside down, not in chaos, but in purpose. She had gone from scraping by to chairing meetings with architects, social workers, and investors. Helen, Richard's advisor, was by her side daily, guiding her through corporate language and legal procedures. But even with that support, the transformation was daunting, and not everyone was convinced. "Miss Thomas," said one of the board members during a planning session, his voice measured but cold, "you come highly recommended by Mr. Harlan, but some of us are concerned about your experience, or rather, your lack thereof." Maya sat upright, keeping her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I understand the concern. I'm not here pretending to be an expert in construction or social reform, but I know what it means to be overlooked. I know what it's like to be dismissed, underestimated. So do the people we're trying to help. That's why I won't let this fail." There was a beat of silence. Helen nodded approvingly, and a few heads around the table shifted slightly, skepticism softening into curiosity. After the meeting, Maya stepped outside, needing air. She walked to a quiet spot at the edge of the lot, where an old elm tree stood tall, somehow spared during site clearance. Leaning against its trunk, she looked out across the street where people bustled in and out of coffee shops and stores, unaware that a dream was being built across the sidewalk. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jordan. "Class was good. Got the part-time job at the bookstore. Mom would have been proud of us." Maya smiled. For a moment, the tension in her chest loosened, but the calm didn't last. That evening, Maya met with Helen in the Harlan Estate's private office. The atmosphere was tense, far removed from the warmth of their previous conversations. "There's something we need to discuss," Helen said, placing a folder on the desk. Maya opened it, revealing news clippings and screenshots from social media. One photo showed her placing a sandwich on the park bench. Another was a thread of comments questioning whether she had known who Richard was all along. One comment read, "Looks staged. Nobody gives food to a random man unless they want attention." Another, "She's just playing the system. From waitress to charity director? Please." Maya stared at the pages, her jaw tightening. "I thought this had passed," she whispered. "I thought people understood." Helen leaned forward, tone calm but firm. "Some do. Many, actually. But you're becoming a public figure now. That means scrutiny, and not all of it is fair. We need to be proactive." "What does that mean?" Maya asked, though the answer already sat heavily in her mind. Helen hesitated. "We need you to speak publicly. Tell your story. Set the record straight before someone else twists it." The thought of standing in front of cameras, of opening her life to the judgment of strangers, made her stomach turn, but she knew Helen was right. Later that night, as she walked home through quiet streets, Maya passed the church near the park, the same one she used to walk by after work. The bench was still there, though now freshly painted. A tiny plaque had been installed at its base. "In honor of unseen kindness, where a meal saved a life." She knelt before it, her hand brushing the plaque. The memory of those nights returned, the silence, the small exchanges of humanity, the truth that no one else had to witness. She sat on the bench, looked up at the stars, and whispered to the dark, "I didn't do it to be seen. I did it because I couldn't not." The next morning, Maya stood before a modest press crowd in front of the developing Haven site. The media had gathered following a quiet announcement from the Harlan Foundation about its new project. Helen stood beside her, and Richard, though Frail, watched from a distance, bundled in a wool coat and scarf, his eyes never leaving Maya. Maya stepped up to the microphone. "2 months ago," she began, "I was a waitress. I worked long hours, cared for my brother, and struggled like so many do. I didn't have a plan for changing the world. I didn't even have a plan to change a block. But I saw someone hungry. I had food, so I gave it." The cameras clicked, the wind stirred, but Maya kept going, her voice gaining strength. "I didn't know who Mr. Harlan was. I just knew what it meant to be invisible. And if this world needs anything, it's more people looking up, more people noticing. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can echo louder than we imagine." She paused, eyes briefly glancing at the crowd. "This center, the Haven, isn't about me. It's about all the people we walk past. It's about remembering that value isn't measured in titles, but in how we treat those who have none." Applause rose, not thunderous, but steady and sincere. As she stepped down, Richard caught her hand and gave a small, proud nod. No words were needed. And deep inside, Maya felt something shift, not just in the people watching her, but in herself. She was no longer just the girl with a sandwich. She was becoming the woman with a mission. It was almost midnight when Maya received the call. She was in her apartment, going through design sketches for the Havens Community Kitchen, and ideas sparked from her own memories of handing out food in the park. The voice on the line was male, professional, but his message was chilling in its simplicity. "You're making enemies you don't see yet, Miss Thomas. Be careful who you trust." The line went dead. Maya sat frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, the hum of silence suddenly louder than the city outside. For a moment she thought it was a prank, someone trying to scare her. But something about the tone, flat, devoid of emotion, made her uneasy. She immediately texted Helen, letting her know about the call. Within minutes, Helen replied, "I'm on it. Don't speak to anyone else. Lock your doors tonight." The next morning, Helen arrived at her apartment with a man Maya hadn't met before. He wore a gray suit, no tie, and introduced himself as Marcus, head of private security for the Harlan Foundation. "This is probably nothing," Marcus said, although his eyes were too sharp, too focused for someone who believed that. "But given the scale of the project, and how fast your profile has risen, it's not surprising that certain groups aren't happy." Maya narrowed her eyes. "What kind of groups?" Marcus didn't flinch. "Developers, landowners, people with investments in shelters that exploit homelessness rather than solve it. You're threatening their bottom line." "And," Maya leaned back, crossing her arms, "I'm just trying to help people. Why would that make me a threat?" "Because real help doesn't make anyone rich," he replied. "But it does change systems, and systems don't like to be changed." Helen placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. "This is what happens when you start making noise where silence kept others powerful. But you're not alone in this." Despite their reassurances, the warning echoed in Maya's thoughts all day. That afternoon, she visited the construction site to oversee the layout for the women's wing. As she walked among the workers, someone pointed out a stack of donated bricks delivered by mistake to the wrong section. Maya went to investigate, but as she rounded the corner, she noticed a man standing too close to the edge of the elevated foundation, watching her intently. He wasn't in uniform, no badge, just jeans and a gray t-shirt. The moment he saw Maya looking, he turned and walked off casually, like he belonged. But Maya's instincts flared. She told Marcus. Security reviewed the camera footage. The man hadn't signed in, and more importantly, he had lingered near the future office space for several minutes alone. That night, Helen insisted Maya relocate temporarily to a guest house within the Harlan estate. Maya protested at first, but Helen didn't budge. "Your safety isn't optional." At the estate, Maya finally had a moment of peace. Jordan visited on weekends. Richard often invited her for evening tea in the sunroom, and her schedule was filled with planning meetings, staff interviews, and visits to shelters across the city. One of those visits shook her deeply. A dilapidated shelter on the east side, run by a private contractor, housed over 80 residents in conditions that bordered on inhumane. Mattresses were stained, windows were bolted shut, and the food served looked barely edible. Maya asked to speak with the director. He refused. Instead, a woman named Mrs. Clarathin, with tired eyes and a calm authority, approached her. "He won't talk to you. He's scared," she said plainly. "You're the one they're whispering about, the woman with the billionaire's blessing." Maya was taken aback. "I'm not trying to take over anyone's work." "No," Clara nodded. "You're trying to do it right. That's why they're scared." Clara led Maya on a silent tour through the facility. Children stared from behind rusted door frames. A young mother whispered, "Please help us," as Maya passed. When she returned to the Harlan estate that night, Maya wept in the privacy of her room. Not from fear, but from the weight of the injustice. She thought of that first sandwich, of the warmth in her chest when the old man looked her in the eye for the first time. That spark had led her here, to this precipice between action and danger. She knew now. Kindness wasn't just an act. It was a choice to be seen, to take up space in a world that benefited from looking away. At the next board meeting, Maya stood at the head of the table and announced a new initiative. We will partner directly with shelters for reform audits. Funding will be tied to treatment quality, not capacity. We're not just building a center, we're raising a standard. There were murmurs. Some smiled, some frowned. One man walked out. Afterward, Marcus approached her quietly. That man? The one who walked out? His brother owns the East Side shelter. Maya nodded slowly. Good. Let them know we're watching. As she left the meeting, Helen joined her, holding out a small box. A gift from Mr. Harlan, she said. Inside was a brass pin shaped like a flame. He said. Helen added, You've lit something they can't put out now. Maya held the pin in her palm, feeling its weight. It wasn't just metal. It was a symbol of what she'd started, of who she was becoming. And as she pinned it to her coat that evening, walking back toward the construction site with its rising walls and flickering floodlights, Maya no longer felt like the girl who once gave a sandwich to a stranger. She felt like the woman who dared to feed justice to a starving city. Rain tapped steadily against the windows of the guest house that night, filling the air with a rhythm that should have been calming. But Maya couldn't sleep. She sat curled on the couch, her laptop glowing in front of her, spreadsheets open, her eyes scanning the latest budget report for the Haven's first construction phase. Numbers she once feared now felt familiar, almost comforting. Still, something lingered beneath the surface, an itch of unease she couldn't ignore. Her phone vibrated. A message from Marcus. Got a new lead on the man from the site. We'll update you tomorrow. Maya replied with a simple, thank you, then stared at the screen. The gray-suited stranger still haunted her thoughts. Not just because he posed a threat, but because of what he represented. The resistance that came when you tried to break the mold. Earlier that week, Maya had given an impromptu speech at a city council meeting, supporting the reallocation of underused public land for low-income housing. It had garnered praise from advocates and threats from developers. Who does she think she is? One headline mocked. Another read, From Waitress to Warlord of Welfare. She closed the laptop and stepped outside. The rain was now a soft mist, drifting like memory. The Harlan estate grounds were quiet, save for the occasional flicker of distant security lights. She walked slowly, letting the damp air cool her thoughts. As she reached the far edge of the property near a garden lined with magnolias, she heard something, a voice, faint, deliberate. You're shaking the right trees, Miss Thomas. Just know when branches fall, they don't always miss. Maya turned sharply. No one was there. The voice had come from beyond the hedge. She stepped closer, heart pounding, but found only wet leaves and shadows. The voice calm, measured, had no face. Again, she reported it immediately. Marcus arrived within minutes, scanned the area, then stayed on site all night. Helen ordered an increase in security detail. But Maya felt something had shifted. This wasn't random intimidation. It was strategic, calculated, and it meant one thing. They were afraid. The next morning, the rain gave way to sharp sunlight. Maya stood before a crowd of volunteers, city planners, and media as they celebrated breaking ground on the first satellite site of the Haven, this one in the 5th Ward, an area long neglected by civic attention. Maya stepped to the podium, microphone feeding her voice to hundreds gathered and thousands more watching live. I grew up in a neighborhood like this, she began. We were told to be grateful for whatever we got, and when we asked for more, they told us we were asking for too much. Sir, she paused, scanning the crowd, spotting familiar faces: Jordan, Helen, Richard in his wheelchair, watching with quiet pride. But I'm here today to tell you, dignity isn't too much. Shelter isn't too much. Safety, clean water, a warm meal, a voice, these are not luxuries. They're the very minimum. Applause broke out. People nodded. Some wept. A woman near the back raised her fist. Maya nodded in return. After the event, she walked through the surrounding streets. A group of teenagers approached her, one of them calling out, Yo, you're the sandwich lady, right? She laughed. Guess that name's gonna stick, huh? You made them listen, one girl said. They never listened to us before. Maya looked at them, faces full of anger, hope, and confusion. She saw herself in them, the same fire, the same fight. Don't stop making noise, she said. You don't need a title to be heard. That evening, Maya met with Helen and Marcus in a private briefing. Marcus laid out new intel. The man in gray was likely connected to a lobbying firm that had quietly funneled money to shelters profiting from city contracts. The same firm now petitioned to audit the Haven for improper allocation of charitable funds. "It's a smear campaign," Helen said. "They're coming at you sideways because they can't stop you head-on." Maya looked at the documents. Redacted names, money trails, photos from city hall meetings, with certain developers always seated in the second row. "Let them come," she said quietly. "But we document everything. We stay transparent, and we stay loud." The days that followed moved fast. Maya began receiving invitations to speak universities, podcasts, panels. Not all were friendly. Some hosts tried to bait her, reduce her work to tokenism. In one radio interview, a caller asked, "You ever wonder if you're just the flavor of the month? A feel-good story they'll forget next year?" Maya paused, then answered, "Maybe, but if one child sleeps safe tonight because of it, I'm okay being forgotten tomorrow." The host went silent, then softly added, "Damn, that's the realest thing I've heard in months." But not all moments were heavy. One afternoon, Jordan surprised her with framed copies of the original newspaper, phototh one of her handing a meal to Richard in the park. "It's not just a photo," he said. "It's a promise." Maya hung it in her temporary office, right beside the architectural rendering of the Haven. It reminded her that even small acts ripple. That night, as she finally lay down, exhausted but fulfilled, she whispered to herself, "I didn't choose this, but I won't let go of it." Outside, somewhere in the city, voices still plotted, but Maya had found her own voice. And now, it was echoing louder than ever. The first sign something was wrong came from an unexpected place, a teenage volunteer named Eli, who had been helping organize supply drives for the Haven's opening. He was sharp, observant, and quiet. That afternoon, as Maya walked the site with a clipboard in hand, Eli caught up with her, panting from running. "Miss Maya," he said, voice low, "you need to see something." She followed him to a shipping container at the edge of the construction site, one of several used for storing donations. Inside, neatly stacked boxes bore the Haven's logo, but when Eli opened one, the contents inside told a different story: cracked canned goods, expired food, and off-brand materials that didn't match any of the logged inventory. Maya knelt down, her stomach twisting. "Where did these come from?" "I don't know," Eli said, "but they're not the ones we packed last week. I double-checked." Marcus was called in immediately. His team reviewed surveillance footage and discovered something chilling. Someone had accessed the containers late at night, bypassing security. The person wore a hard hat and vest blending, and like any worker but their badge ID was fake. The footage cut out 5 minutes into the break-in. Sabotage. Within 24 hours, more issues surfaced. A shipment of lumber disappeared in transit. One of the subcontractors claimed late payments, threatening to halt progress unless compensated despite all records showing invoices cleared. A local news blog ran a story. "Cracks in the Haven. Is the project falling apart?" Maya stood at the center of the storm, fighting to hold ground. She called an emergency meeting with Helen, Marcus, and the legal team. "This isn't random," she said, her tone sharp, eyes dark from too many sleepless nights. "They're trying to build a case against us to make us look like we're incompetent, corrupt, or both." Helen nodded grimly. "And they're smart about it. They're not attacking you directly, they're attacking your infrastructure, piece by piece," Marcus added. "They want to erode trust before you even open the doors." Maya looked around the room, her voice steady. "Then, we go public. Full transparency. We document everything. We admit mistakes, but we also expose what's being done behind the scenes." That night, Maya live-streamed from the construction site, standing in front of the tampered container with Eli by her side. She showed the public exactly what was found, explained the footage, and called for an independent audit. "I won't lie to you," she said into the camera. "This is hard, and someone doesn't want us to succeed. But you deserve to see everything because this center belongs to the people, not just the name on the gate." The video went viral. Volunteers and donors rallied. The city sent an investigator. Public support surged. But behind the scenes, Maya's world was tightening. Her days blurred with crisis management. Her sleep was shallow, haunted by shadows of betrayal. One afternoon, while reviewing internal communications, She found a string of emails from a junior logistics coordinator, oddly defensive, subtly hinting at pressure from someone outside the foundation. His name was Adam Blake. She asked Helen to pull his employment record. It came back clean, but Marcus's deeper background check told another story. Adam had previously worked at a nonprofit that shut down after mismanagement scandals sand. It just so happened that nonprofit had been backed by a certain real estate lobby currently campaigning against the Haven. That evening, Maya confronted him directly. "Adam," she said, catching him just before he left for the day, "do you know who's been tampering with our supply chain?" His face froze, guilt flickering in his eyes like a faulty light bulb. Don't know what you mean." You were recommended to us by someone outside our usual hiring channels," she said calmly. "And now I've got donors questioning whether we're laundering resources. So I'm asking again, not as your boss, but as someone who's given everything to this place. What do you know?" He cracked. "They promised me a job," he whispered. "A real position, triple the pay, if I just slipped a few things through the cracks. Made you look sloppy." Maya stared at him, disbelief and quiet fury mixing inside her. "They?" she asked. Adam's voice trembled. "Someone from the Whalen Group. They have ties to the city council. They want the property this center is on. If it collapses, it reverts back to city development rights. They want condos, not shelters." Maya reported everything. Adam resigned immediately. Helen filed the legal complaints. Marcus sent the proof to trusted press outlets, and city council meetings erupted in heated debate. But the revelation took its toll. That week, Maya collapsed in the guest house kitchen, exhaustion, stress, and a skipped meal catching up to her all at once. Jordan found her on the floor when he stopped by unexpectedly. "You can't keep doing this alone," he said, voice choked as he helped her to the couch. "I'm not alone," she whispered. "I just forgot to ask for help." The next day, Richard Harlan visited her, frailer than before, but eyes still sharp with memory. "You're doing what I couldn't," he told her, voice raspy. "I built systems that made money. You're building systems that save people." Maya looked at him, her eyes glassy. "But they're tearing it apart before it even stands." Richard smiled faintly. "That's how you know it's worth it." He reached into his coat and handed her a thin envelope. Inside was a deed. "You now own the land. Personally, they can't take it back." Maya stared at the document, stunned. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Because you saw me when no one else did," he said. "And I've spent too long investing in things that don't matter. This does." That night, as Maya pinned the flame brooch back on her coat, she stood at the edge of the Haven's future and the rubble of what powerful men had tried to destroy. And she knew this wasn't just about one center. This was a war for the soul of the city. And she was just getting started. It wasn't until she stood before her childhood home abandoned, boarded up, and overrun with weeds, that Maya understood how deep the roots of this fight truly went. The Haven was no longer just about bricks and programs. It was a mirror reflecting generations of silence and suffering, including her own. The city had recently released a list of foreclosed properties, and Helen, thinking it might be useful for future Haven expansions, asked Maya to take a look. That's when she saw the address. 246 Delaney Street. It hit her like a pulse in her chest. She hadn't been back in over 15 years. The house had once been filled with music, the smell of gumbo, and the rustle of her mother's Sunday dresses. Her father's laugh used to rattle the windows. And Maya remembered how the porch felt under her bare feet in summer, warm from the sun and safe like a promise. But after the accident, it was gone, lost to debt and bureaucracy. Maya stood at the chain-link fence, fingers gripping the cold metal. Jordan had been too young to remember much, but she remembered everything. And now, with her name finally on a deed, albeit for a different piece of land, she felt the circle tighten, as if the past had returned not to haunt her, but to ask for closure. Helen met her there an hour later, stepping out of her car with a small folder in hand. "I did some digging," she said, handing it over. "Turns out, the Delaney house is tied to the same municipal zoning office connected to the Whalen Group. The foreclosure process? Rushed, sloppy, probably illegal." Maya opened the folder. Inside were old payment ledgers, memos, and a name she hadn't seen in years: Councilman Robert Langston. Her father had once done free repairs on Langston's campaign headquarters. Maya remembered because they'd spent a Saturday painting signs together while her dad fixed the door hinges. Now Langston's name was on the fast-tracked permits that had gutted her neighborhood and sold it to investors. That's why they're scared, Maya murmured. Because we're pulling up their history, brick by brick. Helen nodded. They paved over stories like yours, but the soil remembers. Back at the Haven site, the foundation walls had begun to rise again. Volunteers had returned in full force, bolstered by public outrage after the sabotage revelations. Support from local churches and retired veterans had grown. Even an old jazz musician donated a portion of his vinyl collection to be played in the communal lounge once construction was complete. Maya stood watching workers pour concrete when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Miss Thomas," the voice said, low and even. "You're becoming quite the problem. You should think about your family's safety. Accidents happen." She didn't flinch. "You want me scared, but all you've done is prove I'm winning." "Ugh, I'm giving you a chance," the voice continued. "Step away. Let the grown-ups handle the city." She hung up. Marcus traced the call to a burner phone, dead within minutes. But it didn't matter. The message was clear. They had nothing left but threats. That meant they were close to losing. The next evening, Maya met with Richard again, this time in his private library. He looked tired, a little thinner, but his spirit remained strong. "They've started digging into your financials," he said, sipping tea, trying to discredit the endowment. "Let them dig," Maya replied. "We've got nothing to hide. I've kept everything clean, just like you taught me." Richard smiled faintly. "No, Maya, you didn't learn that from me. You taught me that again. When I had nothing, you fed me with no cameras, no agenda. You reminded me of who I used to be." Maya looked around the room walls lined with first edition books and framed photographs from decades of business. And yet, the most powerful man she'd ever met had been a forgotten soul on a park bench. "You think the Haven is enough?" she asked quietly. "To stop people like Langston, the Whalen Group?" "No," Richard said, "but it's a crack in the wall, the first of many." Later that night, as the city buzzed around her, Maya met Jordan on the old Delaney porch. They sat side by side on the broken steps, takeout boxes in their laps, stars barely visible through city haze. "You think Mom and Dad would be proud?" Jordan asked. Maya stared at the house, remembering the laughter, the arguments, the warmth. "I think they'd be right here with us," she said, tearing down every crooked thing that took this from us. Jordan leaned against her shoulder. "You've changed," he said softly. "No," Maya whispered. "I just remembered who I was before the world told me to stay quiet." And for the first time in a long time, the old house didn't feel haunted. It felt like the beginning of something being reclaimed. The next morning, Maya filed paperwork to acquire the Delaney property through a legal challenge of the original foreclosure. Her plan? To turn it into the Haven's second outreach site, a place specifically for youth transitioning out of foster care. Because home, she realized, wasn't just where you started. It was where you decided to return and rewrite the ending. The city council chambers smelled of old wood and tension. The air buzzed with anticipation as residents filled every seat, their faces drawn, hopeful, angry. Journalists lined the back wall, cameras ready, pens poised. This wasn't just another hearing, this was a reckoning, and Maya Thomas stood at its center, clipboard in hand, eyes steady. The council had called an emergency session to vote on a zoning review of the Haven's expansion projects. Behind the bureaucratic language, everyone knew what it really was. A calculated move to stall construction and strip Maya of credibility. And the man pushing hardest was none other than Councilman Robert Langston. He sat at the far end of the dais, polished as ever, his signature navy suit impeccable, his eyes shadowed by years of quiet dealings. Maya recognized the smug smile on his lips. It was the same smirk he wore the day her father fixed his office door for free. When her name was called, Maya rose from her seat and walked to the podium. The room hushed. "Good afternoon," she began. "My name is Maya Thomas. I'm the director of the Haven and the daughter of this city." A ripple moved through the room, some nodding, some whispering. She continued, "The Haven is not just a building. It's a response. To silence. To neglect. To years of empty promises made to communities like mine. By men who never intended to keep them." Langston's jaw twitched. Maya lifted a copy of the foreclosure file from her clipboard. This is the record of the property at 246 Delaney Street, my childhood home. It was seized through an illegal fast-track zoning loophole pushed through by this very council at the time, chaired by Councilman Langston. The room stirred. Langston leaned forward. "Miss Thomas, this isn't the place." "With respect, sir," Maya cut in, "it's exactly the place. Because what happened to my family wasn't a fluke. It was policy. And now, you're trying to do it again. Only this time, the home isn't just mine, it belongs to hundreds of people who need shelter, need safety, need justice." She let the words settle. "I'm not here to beg," she said. "I'm here to remind you that the city's watching, and so is history." The room broke into applause. Langston tried to gavel it down, but the sound kept growing. Cheers, chants, reporters scribbling madly. Outside, as Maya stepped into the sunlight, Helen was waiting with a proud smile. "He underestimated you." "He underestimated all of us," Maya replied. Later that evening, Maya received word that the council had voted 6-3 in favor of the Haven's expansion. Langston, though defiant, had lost his grip. But the victory wasn't without cost. That night, the security office at the main site was vandalized. Windows shattered, documents torched. No one was hurt, but it was a desperate gasp from those losing power. Marcus reviewed the footage. They knew where to strike. Cameras were disabled. It's professional. Maya stared at the charred remains of their records room. They're not stopping. They're just changing tactics. But she didn't flinch. Instead, she called an emergency volunteer meeting and live-streamed it. "I won't lie to you," she told the crowd. "We've been hit again. And yes, we're tired. But we are not broken. Because what they keep forgetting is we didn't start this movement with power. We started it with purpose, with love, with a sandwich." The crowd erupted. Some cried, some laughed. Many just stood taller. Over the next days, something remarkable happened. Support poured in not just from the city, but from across the country. Retired construction workers flew in to help rebuild. A union of electricians donated labor. A former city planner anonymously sent evidence of past bribes tied to Langston's votes. The tide was turning. But then came the subpoena. Helen delivered it quietly one morning, her face unreadable. "They're opening an investigation," she said, "accusing us of misappropriating funds through your endowment from Richard." Maya felt the air shift. "Is it the city?" "No, it's federal." For a moment, everything slowed. The chairs, the coffee, the sunlight, all of it faded behind the noise in her head. She had known it would get ugly, but it wasn't just a battle for land. It was a battle for her name. Richard called her that night. "They're not after you," he said. "They're after me, and I deserve that. But don't let my past bury your future." "Then help me fight it," she said. "I already am," he replied. "Check your inbox in 5 minutes." The email was a digital ledger, signed affidavits, and wire transfers showing every penny of the endowment clean, verified, backed by 3 accounting firms. It was a lifeline. The next morning, Maya met with the investigators and handed over everything. "I have nothing to hide," she said, "but I do have something to protect." As they left, one paused at the door. "You're not what we expected," he said. "I rarely am," she replied. Outside, the sun was rising, and for the first time in weeks, Maya felt its warmth on her fastenot as a comfort, but as a promise. They would try again, and she would still be here. Unmoved, unbought, unbroken. The days that followed the subpoena moved like storm clouds, slow, heavy, and darkening everything beneath them. The Haven's progress slowed, not from lack of will, but from the weight of legal uncertainty. Donors hesitated. Volunteers asked quiet questions. Rumors swirled. Maya didn't blame them. Doubt had a way of slithering in even through the smallest crack. She spent her mornings fielding calls from attorneys and auditors, her afternoons walking the construction site to reassure the crew, and her nights drafting open letters to keep the public informed. She didn't sleep much. She didn't eat enough. And sometimes, in the quiet moments before sunrise, she wondered if the voice on the burner phone had been right, if this fight was too big, too dangerous, too costly. One morning, while walking through the nearly completed west wing of the Haven, she noticed an older man sitting alone on a stack of drywall. His jacket was tattered, his boots caked in old mud. He wasn't part of the crew. He looked like he had wandered in. "Sir?" she said gently. He turned, startled, then smiled faintly. "You're her, the lady from the internet." Maya chuckled. "Depends what part of the internet you've seen." He stood slowly, extending a hand. "Name's Curtis. Was a plumber for 30 years. Lost the house after the plant closed. I've been in and out of places since." She shook his hand. "You need something, Mr. Curtis?" "I need to help," he said. "I don't want a handout. I just want to swing a hammer. Do something again that means something." Maya blinked away the sting in her eyes. "Then welcome aboard." That afternoon, Curtis helped wire fixtures in the women's dormitory. By evening, 3 more unhoused volunteers had joined him. Word had spread. People weren't just coming to the Haven for shelter. They were coming to rebuild it with their own hands. But as the movement grew, so did the pressure. Langston returned to the media circuit, painting Maya as a reckless figurehead who had gotten in over her head. "She's well-intentioned," he told one outlet, "but misguided. We need professionals handling city resources, not viral sensations." Maya watched the clip from her office, jaw tight. Helen entered moments later with more news. "They're planning to introduce a bill," she said, "aimed at freezing all privately funded public housing projects pending further oversight." Maya leaned back in her chair. "They're trying to kill the entire model." Helen nodded. "They're scared. You've created a blueprint they can't control." That night, Maya received a call from an unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer, but something told her to. The voice on the other end was female, hesitant. "Miss Thomas, you don't know me, but I used to work for the Whalen Group. I was in the room when they planned the smear campaign. I can't stay quiet anymore." The woman, who identified herself only as Karen, agreed to meet with Maya and her legal team at a neutral location. The next day, they gathered in a quiet church basement, Karen's hands shaking as she slid a flash drive across the table. "I can't keep carrying this," she whispered. The files contained email chains, contracts, and audio recordings tying Whalen executives directly to Langston's office evidence that not only were they behind the vandalism and sabotage, but also the false reports triggering the federal probe. It was the break they needed. Within 48 hours, Maya's legal team filed an injunction to halt the council's bill. Press outlets began reporting on the leaked files. Protesters appeared outside City Hall demanding Langston's resignation. National news picked up the story. The Haven under fire became the Haven under siege and fighting back. Still, Maya remained measured. She knew that revenge didn't build homes, resolve did. The following Sunday, she held a town hall meeting at the unfinished main wing. Nearly 300 people showed up, some angry, some curious, many simply needing hope. Maya stepped onto a makeshift stage made of stacked pallets. "Some of you have been lied to," she began. "Some of you have doubted me, and that's okay. Doubt is human. But what we're building here isn't based on one woman. It's built on the hands and hearts of everyone who refuses to accept that the way things are is the way they must remain." She paused, scanning the crowd. "This place will open, not because I say so, but because we've made it impossible not to." Thunderous applause followed, but Maya didn't smile. She knew the fight wasn't over. It had only changed shape. After the meeting, she sat alone in the half-lit hallway of the admin wing, surrounded by blueprints and paint buckets. The silence felt thick with memory. Richard joined her quietly, settling beside her with the careful grace of a man aging faster than he wished. "I never had a daughter," he said, "but if I had, I'd want her to be like you." Maya looked at him. "Stubborn and sleep-deprived?" He chuckled. "Fearless and uncompromising with her heart." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he handed her a folded note. Inside was a single sentence: "The truth may tremble, but it never breaks." As she looked up, Richard added, "I had that engraved on the first server we ever built at HeartLesson Systems, back when we still believed we were changing the world." Maya held the paper close. "Then let's change it again. This time, for real." Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, the foundation held strong. And somewhere in the city, the powerful were learning that when the forgotten rise, there's nowhere left to hide. Maya stood in the main hall of the Haven, eyes tracing the beams overhead, the ones she had once only seen in blueprints. The air smelled like fresh drywall and new beginnings. It was quietrely quiet anymore. But in that brief pause before the storm, she allowed herself one breath. steady and slow. The opening ceremony was only 2 weeks away. A ribbon cutting with press, families, community leaders, and a handful of national figures now rallying behind the project. The world, it seemed, had finally caught up to the fire she lit in a park with one sandwich. But Maya knew better. Fires could light paths, or they could consume them. Helen walked in briskly, holding her tablet and wearing that expression Maya had come to recognize. There was news, and it wasn't good. Langston just held a press conference, Helen said without even sitting. He's filing a lawsuit not against the foundation, but against you, personally. Maya blinked. On what grounds? Defamation, harassment, conspiracy to undermine a public servant. Helen looked down. And he's got 3 PACs funding the legal push. Maya paced. Her sneakers echoed against the concrete. So they're shifting again. If they can't stop the building, they'll try to destroy the builder. Exactly, Helen said. This is psychological warfare now. You've become the symbol, and they think if they break you, they break the movement, Maya finished. But they're too late for that. Still, the move was strategic. Even if unfounded, the lawsuit would tie Maya down in courts, drain resources, and cast a shadow on the grand opening. And that was the point. But Maya had learned something in this fight. When power strikes, you don't retreat, you broadcast. She called an emergency press conference for the following morning. The courtyard outside the Haven buzzed with cameras and reporters before sunrise. The podium stood against the newly painted facade, flanked by volunteers and residents who had helped build it. Maya stepped up, her flame brooch catching the light. I've been threatened, investigated, lied about, and now sued, she began, voice steady. But let me be clear, this is not about me. This is about a system that has profited from poverty, and now trembles at the sight of equity. She held up the subpoena. They want this to scare you, to silence you. But what they don't understand is we were already quiet. We were quiet when homes were taken, when families slept in cars, when veterans begged for warmth, and we said nothing. But now we speak. The crowd erupted. Flashbulbs fired. A veteran behind her wept. Councilman Langston has forgotten the first duty of leadership, to serve, not self, not donors, but people. We remember, and we will not stop. Later that day, Maya sat with Marcus and the legal team. They would fight the lawsuit, but she knew the real fight was still in the shadows. Then came the fire. It started in the north wing, near the laundry room. Security footage showed a figure slipping through a back entrance late at night. Gasoline, a match. By the time fire crews arrived, half the women's dormitory had been scorched. Maya arrived to the flashing lights, sirens echoing through the block, tears stinging her eyes as the structure she helped raise crumbled into smoke. But what broke her most wasn't the fear, it was the note they found taped to the back door. Stay down, Maya. Last warning. Helen and Marcus stood beside her in the ash. Helen touched her shoulder. They're done pretending now. Maya turned to face her, eyes burning with something deeper than anger. Then we stopped pretending too. The next 72 hours moved in a blur. News of the arson spread nationwide. A senator publicly condemned the attack. Donations flooded in. Thousands volunteered to help rebuild. Formerly unhoused mothers, once silent, spoke on live streams and at rallies. This place gave us dignity, one said, and you can't burn dignity down. But Maya was changed. Not broken, but sharpened. Her voice lost its softness, replaced by iron. She visited the burn site daily, walking its edges like a general surveying battlefields. One morning, she stood in the middle of the wreckage, surrounded by construction crews, and raised her hand. No delays, she said. We rebuild, stronger, fireproof. And this time, we inscribe every wall with the names of the people who tried to stop us. Future generations know what we survived. Richard, now mostly confined to his home, sent a message through Helen. You've built more than a shelter. You've built an inheritance. And Maya knew it was true, because what she was protecting wasn't just a place, or a name, it was the future of every forgotten voice, every ignored hand. A week later, the foundation board voted unanimously to make Maya the permanent executive director of all Haven centers citywide. There would be more buildings, more teams, more battles, but none would match the first. That night, Maya stood before the charred frame of the north wing, wind whispering through open beams. Jordan joined her, silent for a moment. "You ever regret it?" he asked. Maya shook her head. "Number, not even the fire." He nodded, wrapping his arm around her. "Then I don't either." And together, they stood in the ruins not as victims, not as survivors, but as architects of something greater, something flame could not erase. The morning of the court hearing dawned gray and cold, like the breath before a storm. Maya adjusted her coat and stepped out of the black sedan. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, shouting questions over each other. Cameras flashed. Protesters held signs in support, others demanding accountability and transparency. But Maya walked forward, unflinching. Her lawyer, a calm, sharp-witted woman named Nadine Clark, walked beside her, folders in hand and quiet fire in her step. Helen and Marcus flanked them, and behind them were 24 supporters, many of whom had once stood in soup kitchen lines Maya had helped serve. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Councilman Robert Langston sat at the plaintiff's table, smug in a blue pinstripe suit, surrounded by a team of attorneys dressed like shadows. He glanced at Maya with a smirk of someone who believed the system still bent to his will. The judge, an aging black woman named Judge Ruth L. Hampton, entered, her gavel bringing the room to order. Her eyes were sharp, tired of games, and known for cutting through noise with surgical precision. "Mr. Langston," she began, "your lawsuit claims personal defamation, emotional distress, and intentional disruption of public trust. You understand the burden of proof lies with you?" "Yes, Your Honor," Langston said with a confident nod. "And Miss Thomas," Judge Hampton turned, "your team has countersued for malicious prosecution, and you've submitted counter-evidence of a conspiracy tied to public misconduct. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Nadine responded. "Then let's proceed. And let's be quick. I've got no patience for theater." The hearing unfurled like a chess match. Langston's attorneys accused Maya of orchestrating vigilante civic activism, citing speeches, social media campaigns, and the viral video of her calling out City Hall. She weaponized public sentiment against a sitting councilman, one lawyer barked, and created a hostile environment under the pretense of social justice. Nadine rose calmly. "Your Honor, we have audio files, emails, and sworn statements proving Mr. Langston accepted bribes to undermine community housing initiatives, including the Haven. We will demonstrate that his lawsuit is not only unfounded, it's retaliatory." One by one, they presented the evidence. Karen, the whistleblower, testified via video call. Her voice trembled, but her truth was clear. "I was told to plant delays, to discredit Maya. They wanted to reclaim the land for development contracts." Nadine submitted the flash drive with all communication logs. Then came Maya's turn on the stand. "Miss Thomas," Nadine began, "can you tell the court what the Haven means to you?" Maya's voice was steady. "It's a home built from everything this city forgot. It's the warmth I needed as a child and never got. It's a promise that no one's past will disqualify them from dignity." "Did you ever intend to defame Councilman Langston?" "No," Maya said clearly. "But I did intend to hold him accountable, and if the truth offends him, that's not my burden." Gasps and murmurs rose from the gallery. Judge Hampton banged the gavel. "Silence or I clear the room." After closing statements, the judge called for a recess to deliberate. Outside the courtroom, Maya leaned against the marble wall, her breath slow, fingers trembling slightly. Jordan walked up and offered her a bottle of water. "You did good," he whispered. "I told the truth," she replied. "That should be enough." An hour later, they were called back in. Judge Hampton took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and stared at both parties for a long moment. "This city is no stranger to corruption, and it's no stranger to courage. I've reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, and the patterns." She paused, then continued. "I hereby dismiss all charges filed by Councilman Langston against Maya Thomas, and I refer his conduct to the State Ethics Commission for immediate investigation." Gasps exploded in the room. "In addition," she added, "I grant Miss Thomas's request for public record clearance and deny any further injunctive relief sought by the plaintiff. This court recognizes the Haven as a legally sound nonprofit with clear records of integrity." The gavel struck. Case closed. Outside, the crowd erupted. Reporters surged. Langston stormed into a black SUV without a word. But Maya stood on the steps with Jordan, Marcus, Helen, and dozens of supporters behind her. One journalist called out, "Maya, what will you do next?" She smiled, not a boastful smile, but the kind you wear when you've earned something the hard way. "We open the doors," she said, "and then we build more." That evening, back at the Haven, volunteers had placed a banner over the main entrance. "Justice is a foundation too." Maya touched it gently, her eyes wet but shining. In the garden, Curtis planted a magnolia tree beside the north wing, new roots for sacred ground. Children painted murals on the walls. Elderly women folded linens in the common room. A jazz saxophonist played softly on the porch. The lawsuit hadn't stopped them. It had baptized them. And Maya, once just a waitress with a warm heart and a tired smile, was now a leader forged in fire, raised by truth, and followed not because she demanded it, but because she reminded others of who they were before the world told them to settle. The opening day was near, but for Maya, the real opening had already happened. In hearts, in homes, and soon, in history. The sun rose gently over the city the morning the Haven officially opened. It was a golden kind of light, the kind that made sidewalks shine and turned glass into flame. Maya stood at the main entrance, her hands clasped behind her back, taking in the sight of people lining the block, families with children, war veterans, social workers, pastors, local artists. And across the street, neighbors who had once been skeptics now held homemade signs, "Welcome home," and "Thank you, Maya." She had put on the same coat she wore the day she was fired, the fabric worn soft over time. The flame brooch rested on her lapel, quiet but defiant. Richard Harlan's cane clicked beside her as he approached, walking slowly but upright, a hint of pride hidden behind his aged eyes. "You remember what you said to me in the park?" he asked. Maya smiled. "I said, 'Are you hungry, sir?' 'No,' he said, chuckling. 'You said, 'You look like someone who needs someone to care.' And you were right. I just didn't know how much." They didn't say anything else. They didn't need to. The ribbon waited, stretched taut in front of the doors. Maya stepped forward, took the oversized gold scissors from Helen, and paused for just a moment. "This is for everyone who was told they didn't belong," she said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "And everyone who made space anyway." The blade sliced clean, the ribbon fell, and the Haven came alive. Inside, volunteers directed guests to guided tours. The children's reading room overflowed with donated books. The women's dormitory glowed with lavender walls and quilted comforters sewn by church grandmothers. The kitchen hummed with life as a team of culinary school grads prepared meals for hundreds. Jordan led a group of college students through the tech lab, proudly pointing out donated laptops. In the community hall, local jazz musicians played soft music, while Curtis gave a walking tour of the gardens, smiling like he'd just rediscovered his purpose. Maya moved through it all quietly, not because she didn't want recognition, but because the real reward was seeing others take ownership of what they had built. She watched a young mother guide her daughter into the art therapy room. An elderly man clutched a cup of hot coffee like it was gold. A formerly homeless teenager, now a youth mentor, helped teach computer skills to a shy boy. These were the moments that never made headlines, but they were the heartbeats of change. As dusk settled and the first day of the Haven came to a close, Maya stood alone in the back garden under the magnolia tree. The soft petals moved in the wind, dancing in the light of the street lamps. She touched the bark, remembering her parents, her childhood home, her long walk from Waitress to Warrior. Richard joined her again, this time with 2 envelopes in hand. "One is a check," he said, "enough to fund 3 more centers. The other is a letter me final resignation from every board I ever sat on that forgot what it means to serve." Maya took both, holding them like sacred offerings. "I thought I was giving you a second chance," he said, "but you were giving it to me." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked around at the place they had saved from flames, lies, and greed. "This was never about saving anyone," she finally said. "It was about remembering we don't need permission to care." Later, in her office, she sat alone and opened the second envelope. The letter was handwritten in Richard's careful script. At the bottom was a line she underlined twice. "Some doors open with keys. The most important ones open with courage." She placed the letter in her drawer and leaned back in her chair. She thought of every night she had cried alone. Every morning she had doubted herself. Every time she had chosen hope instead of fear. And she realized this wasn't an ending. It was an invitation. That night, the haven stayed open late. A storm rolled through the city, but inside, the lights stayed warm. No one was turned away. No one was questioned. They came as they were. Maya walked the halls one last time before resting. She paused outside the front door, looking out at the city skyline, glistening with rain. Behind her, she heard someone whisper, "She's the reason I'm not on the street tonight." But Maya didn't turn around. She didn't need to know who said it, because that voice, it could have been any of them. And that, she realized, was the point. They had come looking for shelter. They had found a sanctuary, and in Maya Thomas, they had found the proof that one voice, one act of kindness, could ignite an entire revolution.